Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, everywhere in the world. So in 2021, UMAC commemorates its 20th anniversary. And as part of several activities we will do this coming year, one of them that's very cherished and very popular already among our viewers on YouTube is the series UMAC Origins, of which this is the 8th episode. My name is Marta Lourenço, and I have a very, very special guest indeed. Steven de Clercq is talking from the Netherlands, and he was the first vice chair of UMAC for 2 mandates between 2001 and 2007. And so it's a delight to have him here. He was also personally my PhD supervisor, but that's another story. Well, it's in a way it's connected, but yeah, but that's not what
you will not escape.
Yeah, okay. But anyway, what brings us here is to try to clarify, understand the origins of UMAC. And I would start by asking Steven, perhaps even before the origins, a little bit about the prehistory of UMAC and how he became involved with the problematic of university museums and collections in the first instance in Europe and then all over the world. So how were you brought into the sphere of the problems and challenges of university museums and collections, Steven de Clercq?
Well, in retrospect, I have the feeling that I lived in the years of transition of the, let's say, old 19th century universities with an elite going to the university, and students and staff had nothing to say. And we worked, and collections played an important, a very important role in my education as a geologist at the University of Amsterdam. I remember vividly the moment that through the Institute loudspeaker, we were invited to go to the big lecture hall, and the professor
in Amsterdam.
In Amsterdam
as a student.
I was a student. It must have been 67 or 68, 67, I guess, maybe earlier. Well, those years, and we were all summoned to the big lecture hall, and the professor in general geology told that finally there was a proof of continental drift. It existed, and we could, with geophysical and means, we could prove continental drift. So this was, well, a moment in which thinking about geology had an enormous transition, with paleomagnetism and geophysics playing an important role, and so on and so forth. Not long before, we had the double helix in biology. Right. We had the introduction of microbiology, an enormous explosion. Mm-hmm. The introduction of the computer. Yeah. All these things suddenly happened. And at the same time, we had an enormous democratization wave. And
access to higher education.
Access to higher education of everybody. So there was a boom of students, new staff members, an enormous need for space of laboratories, and working on collections was old-fashioned. There was so much new to be done. So we've done enough with those collections. You can all computerize the whole stuff and we can get rid of it.
Yeah.
This enormous growth of students, number of students, and reorganizations the institutes were all in old houses somewhere in town. So there was the need of building campuses. Well, this whole movement, in my view, is a very important aspect in what we in the valuation by the general public of collections. They were really regarded as old
things, old stuff. Old
useless.
stuff.
We've done it.
Useless.
I mean, nobody wants to. You don't want to be old-fashioned research.
Yeah.
So you go to the new stuff.
You don't look backwards, you look forward. Plus, there was no space. So what are we going to do with all this? It has no meaning.
And so much space, and the entire building was full with cabinets, and we don't like it stuff anymore. We do new stuff. In 74, well, I was a student in Amsterdam. Already as a student member of the democratized faculty board and so on and so forth, I was always engaged in that kind of stuff.
Right.
In 74, I got a position at the University of Utrecht geology faculty, where I mean, when I started geology in Amsterdam, we started with 8 students, and at the end of the first year, there were 4 left. So, I mean, that was the number of students. And we had a faculty in Amsterdam, City Amsterdam, the Free University, the second in Amsterdam, in Groningen, in Amsterdam, in Leiden, and in Delft. So there were 6 faculties with those numbers of students, which was...
Why do you think, was it because of the oil crisis that geology was in decline, or why do you think that was?
Why geology wasn't... I think the intention was there was no need for more geologists. There was no work for them.
Yeah.
And I don't know why, but it was very difficult when I finished finally to find a job as a geologist. And I didn't want to go into the oil industry because my great-grandfather had been instrumental in the birth of even Shell. Yeah. So I mean,
it was not something you wanted. No.
I mean, that was impossible. So in 74, I got this job at the University of Utrecht, and one of my main tasks was to oversee the merger of the faculty of Leiden and Utrecht. Leiden went to Utrecht.
Faculty of Geology.
It's all about geology, yeah. And there had to be a new building, and so I was in the construction committee of the building, and it became clear there was no space for the old collections. In Leiden, that was not a particular problem, because it's important to realize that already at the end of the 19th century, there was a very close link between the
faculty and the museum.
What became the National Museums of Natural History of
Naturalis. 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 No, the name is Naturalis.
Fabulous Naturalis. I mean, I don't know whether you've seen the new thing. It's fabulous. Beautiful. It's fabulous, absolutely.
We will put the links under the video. We will put all the relevant links that Stephen.
Naturalis is really an amazing development. But that's now.
Yeah.
So the collections which were no longer of active use by the Leiden staff went to what is now Naturalis. But in Utrecht, there was no space for them. It stayed behind in the former building on the Oude Gracht, a fantastic place, an old city castle
Beautiful.
from the 14th century, something like that. It was full stocked with stones, and it stayed behind. It was there.
It was geology, mineralogy, petrology, paleontology, everything. The whole thing.
The whole entire collection stayed more or less behind in that building which was abandoned.
Yeah, so they put the collections there, closed the door. There was no interest from the students, no interest from the professors.
Students, no interest from the staff, and no purpose for the building, so it stayed behind in the building.
Yeah.
And then another vivid memory is, so that was 74, 5, 6. A very good friend of mine who lived upstream the river. I look down. He lived downstream, and I look downstream the river on that picture. And he also a geologist, paleontologist, vertebrate paleontologist. And he picked me up. So we often drove together to the institute. And I know exactly the spot and the time of the day when we drove somewhere along the Amsterdam-Rijn Canal. And Paul said, "Hey, shall we make a natural history museum of those old collections?" Because the same had happened with the zoology collections in a building also in the old town.
Of course.
So I never worked in a museum.
Both the geology, the zoology collections were sort of irrelevant or meaningless for these new studies.
Zoology was exactly the same. And
the same.
It proved later that it was also true for many of the collections of veterinary pathology and human pathology, and
medicine and scientific instruments and so on.
Everything, all that kind of stuff was scientific instruments were already rescued in Utrecht. That's part of the story. Which
it's true. It's true. It's true. Yeah. It's true. So at what point did you realize, I mean, this cannot be, I mean, all this work done by decades of scientists accumulated in these...
was that moment that Paul said, come on, let's make a museum of natural history. And by then, on the national level, there had been the intention that every major town should have a natural history museum.
At the government level, the government of the Netherlands.
So Utrecht is province capital.
Province.
It was nothing in Utrecht. So we went to the Department of Culture and Education and said, hey, listen, I mean, there is this wish on the government level, and we have the collections. And the building. So great. Within, I mean, a couple of weeks, we had the idea that I think we could get a couple of million. It was incredible. Absolutely incredible. So we started working on the whole thing, and then...
So the lack of interest, sorry to interrupt, but the lack of interest was not so much from the Netherlands and the government of the Netherlands. The lack of interest was from the university itself, right? Absolutely. It was not so much...
It was from the scholars at the... both the faculty members and of course the
administration.
So then we really started working on that thing, and then a couple of things happened. The second oil crisis, lack of money, and Kinesimme. They didn't. They thought they didn't allow us that game. They wouldn't allow us that game. They thought no, let's not have that, and it will cost the university money, and so on and so on. So nothing. Only
nothing came out of it. Nothing.
Nothing came out of it. But what had come out of it was that we had already established contacts with, well, of course, I mean, the geology world is so small, everybody knew each other. So,
right.
Well, so we had contacts with Groningen and with Amsterdam, and where the same thing happened.
Yeah.
So we went into action by, with the help of this civil servant at the ministry,
Yeah.
to compose questions. Is the minister aware of the fact that so-and-so collections are being thrown away?
Yeah.
So we found members of parliament to pose these questions, and then the minister had to answer.
Of course.
We have been playing that
the
trick.
Minister of Research and Universities.
It was the Minister of Culture.
The Ministry of Culture.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And sometimes,
but at the same time, you were networking already with the
we were enormously
five universities, right? Right.
Yeah, not with Leiden, because they had their
problem solved.
They have their own problem, so we didn't work with them, but we worked with mainly Amsterdam, Groningen, so Utrecht, Amsterdam, Groningen, Delft.
Delft.
The mining stuff.
Yeah.
And those universities were the first to. So
the oldest, for those who don't know, it's the oldest universities in the Netherlands. So the most significant in terms of heritage, collections, museums, libraries, archives, everything, you know.
So there are 5 old universities, well, 5 and a technical high school, but the old universities are, first of all, Leiden, Groningen, Amsterdam, Utrecht, and then Delft as a technical. We were the old 5.
Yeah.
And there was already a university museum in Utrecht, which of which
you became director in 1980. You became director of the museum in 1982.
But before I came director, whilst we were active trying to establish the Natural History Museum, we contacted the director of the existing university museum. Are you interested? He said, no, I'm not interested. So we went our own way. That museum had been established as a history of the discovery of a fabulous collection of even some 17th, 18th, and early 19th scientific instruments of absolutely world quality.
World quality. It's incredible.
Yeah. Found on the attic of the physics laboratory. It had been hidden there for decades, and nobody.
In a way, it's the same story over and over again. So already in the 1930s, some collections had been 30s, 20s. 1918. Some collections had been dumped in the attic because they were useless for teaching and research. So this is a kind of a repetitive story with universities, isn't it? But then there's somebody
that
along the road
discovered.
Discovers.
And Mr. van Sittert, who founded, they were very making good show with it in such a good way that the city of Utrecht donated in 1936 a building to the university to house the university collection. It was a gift of the city to the university.
Fantastic.
Which was later very important, because when I had to move later, I said, well, I have the property.
The property is of the city. It's of the citizens of Utrecht. It's not of the university. Exactly.
So that was useful. But to his regret, the collections, the instruments were moved to the building, 1936, but not he, but an old, retired, my age, almost 80, schoolmaster became the director and to see after the collections of the history of the university and student life.
Yeah.
So from the beginning, the museum had these two poles,
components. Yeah.
two components. And the history of the university and student life, fabulous stuff, incredible
Absolutely.
stuff, very,
Absolutely.
very interesting. So that was there. But so my predecessor, he was not interested. He fell ill and sick, and in '82, I was appointed director of the Utrecht University Museum. By then, I had roamed through the university and found that there were at least 20 or 25 separate collections and often even called museum within the faculty.
Orphaned, totally orphaned. No one.
Sometimes orphaned, sometimes used, but I mean, from musical instruments, art, dentistry, well, the whole shebang. Yeah. And so at my interview with the university, I said, my feeling is that the director of the university museum should have the same kind of responsibility towards all collections as the librarian to
all the books.
So if you can manage, go ahead. So that was, and I asked, who is my boss? Well, they didn't really know. So what about the rector? Yeah, that's great. So
that's fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah, it was really to be directly under the director. And I had the same status, not salary, but status
as of a faculty, a dean.
Of a faculty. That was great.
That was great. Also, it gives a statute to the museum inside the university, right? It's not a departmental museum.
No,
it was a university museum proper.
Directors were my direct colleagues, which was very important.
Yeah.
My first day in geology, when you are newly appointed, the first Friday evening, you look for good drinks with your staff.
Is that the norm in the Netherlands?
That was the norm in geology. I don't know how it is now, but it was the norm. Well, I mean, as a new director, that was impossible to come with drinks in a museum. So it was August, and the blackberries were ripe. So my wife Barbara, she made a wonderful Brahma tart, and I went with this in a nice. There was a small group. There were 12, 18 people or something like that in the museum. And with it in a towel with the tart, I came to the by bus. And when I got off the bus, a former colleague who worked for physics, they had the same kind of job as I had at geology at He worked at Philips, so we knew each other well. He said, "You're a nice guy, but absolutely crazy." As chair of the financial committee of the university, I must tell you that the university cannot afford a university museum. So I'm sorry for you.
He told you that. He told you that.
At my first morning. At my very first morning. And I'll see to it, I must see to it that the museum is closed.
Jesus.
First morning. So it was immediately clear that I needed to find support and
recognition, advocacy, money, everything,
and make it relevant to the faculties.
Yeah.
So then we started at a crazy space, 6 weeks on, 2 weeks off, 6 weeks on, 2 weeks off, making exhibitions of the work of the researchers.
Yeah.
And that was what that was the first we had to do, make exhibitions.
Give visibility, right? Give visibility
Make
to
visibility. And usually it was not always easy to find faculties willing to do it, because dienstverlening, we cannot afford this kind of helping you.
We have no time. We have no time. We don't have the will.
There's nothing for us. So you had.
There's nothing for us, exactly.
So you had to really to find the crazy idiots or the bedreigde, the threatened, those that were threatened to be kicked out, or had already such a name, were willing to
the ones that were not so valued, the ones that were not so valued were
were not so valued, or anyhow, it did work in the end. And I mean, when I came,
of course it did work. I mean, you did a wonderful project. It's beautiful, the architecture. When I visited, I know, but not so much, not so much. 1 decade, huh? 1 decade.
No,
it opened in 1996, right? It opened in 1996.
So, and this is 82. So this
is 82. So yeah, it took a while. It took a while.
So I was, I guess, through the contact with the civil servant at the ministry, I was also quite soon invited to become a member of the National Cultural Committee, advising the minister, which was also a wonderful place to learn.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, sure.
And to have influence. So we then really quick, I tried to put down some dates, but very early on, you spoke about the international contacts. Almost.
Did you already have international contacts at that point? I mean, at what point in this difficult period, which is when you become director of a museum without recognition really, and having to do everything.
No experience in a museum whatsoever.
No experience. You're a geologist, exactly. No experience, with colleagues against you, with colleagues against the museum, saying this must be closed. There's nothing in here for us. So at what point did you realize, first of all, you already knew that it was a Dutch problem, so it was a common problem of the 5 universities. But at what point did you reach out to international colleagues about...
The first international contact came very soon after my appointment, 1 or 2 months at the most. Gerard Turner.
Gerard Turner. The boss, our hero.
Hero. Gerard Turner came on inspection. He wanted to know, who is this new guy who is in charge of that collection? Is he
that beautiful collection cannot be, and so on. Right.
So it was really Gerard Turner who brought me into the Scientific Instruments Commission.
Yeah.
And
for those who don't know, the Scientific Instrument Commission is a network of scholars and curators and historians of science devoted to the promotion and awareness of collections of scientific instruments all over the world.
Yeah. And Gerard
so
from Oxford.
Gerard Turner. Yeah.
And so that was, I mean, having Gerard as patron has been very useful.
Very important.
And in the same year that I was appointed, 82, I received a letter from Madame Jacqueline Sonolin, who on behalf of Marcel Mérieux informed us whether we would be interested in participating in a association of museums of the history of medical sciences.
Oh, medicine. Okay,
Yeah.
sure. Because you also had a lot of medical, very important dentistry collections in Utrecht, right?
Yeah, really, really an important collection.
Yeah.
So that was established in 1983. The chair was Brian Bracegirdle from the Wellcome Museum.
Yeah.
And he insisted that I became a board member, and within shortly I was, as a geologist, secretary of the European Association of Museums of the History of Medical Sciences.
Medical sciences, yeah.
Which is
welcome to the world of university museums, you know, that's...
Yeah. So and that was 83 already, while I was appointed 82. So that went very quick.
Yeah, but all these, both the scientific instruments and the collections of medicine are not yet university specific, related to the problem, because you have collections of scientific instruments in other institutions, not only in higher education, and the same with medical collections. So the question, the real problem of universities, well, the problem that you started our conversation with, like lack of recognition, lack of relevance, lack of significance for present day teaching and research.
It was national.
That was national.
It remained on the national level. Yeah.
But through these international networks, you realize that it was all over. It was all over.
You're right. I mean, most participants in the scientific instruments, but mainly particularly in the medical collections, they were private collections and nice, but lacked there was a great lack of professionality. Brian Bracegirdle, of course, saw it as keeper of the Wellcome collection. He was quite aware of it. But afterwards,
there's many collections by doctors and former doctors and
amateurish. So I finally quit that thing. But already in 85, I managed to bring my colleagues from the 5 old universities, as mentioned, together to make a superficial inventory of the collections of their universities.
That was very important because very early, right?
The
first, exactly. So there were surveys done in other countries like Australia, the Cinderella collections, and also the UK.
Which we were not aware. No.
Of which there was this need to know what exists. I think that was felt everywhere. But for the Netherlands, it's really early because it's 1980s. When you start with a consistent, systematic methodology, going through the 5 universities and seeing what exactly do we have and what is the importance and significance of what we have. So that was very early in terms of international terms.
We registered over 200 or 250 collections in the whole thing. And that brought about quite an awareness in this National Committee of Art and Science, of the advisory committee. What is it called?
The government, at government level.
Rijkscommissie voor de Musea, National Committee for the Museum, of which I was a member. So we managed to bring that further. And it became also clear that you have to, you cannot keep everything.
You have to
be open to deaccessioning. And well, that was for a geologist obvious. Every geologist knows how you collect, and that it is useless to keep all the stuff. And that you can reduce a collection. But so then you have
But in other types of collections, it's more complicated, right?
Yeah, but still, how many dentist chairs do you need?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
we had.
But I remember that the Dutch approach was quite controversial. In fact, there's some papers. I will also give the link about how this discussion evolved, but first in the Netherlands and then in the UK and other countries about the deaccessioning. And
how do you think about the deaccessioning? Because that was is really very important. And by working in this way, parallel to what happened here, there was also a growing awareness of all kinds of collections in the Netherlands. So the Collectie Nederland, what is it? And what is worth? And there is an enormous lack of good maintenance and good space and so on and so forth.
And professionals, because the old professionals were no longer interested in collections. Some had already died.
That is the university collections, but in the entire museum world. In the entire museum world, there was an awareness that we have to, there is an enormous backlash, or how you call it?
Backlog.
Backlog. Enormous backlog. And so we need to establish criteria for what we keep, and A, B, C, and D, and which was later used, which we developed with the university collections, but finally was used nationwide.
Nationwide.
So that was in 86 that we had this advice to the minister to do that, all that kind of stuff.
Which was done, and the results of the survey were published, and it was.
And finally, 10 years later, was a very big survey done. But before some things happened, a few things happened. 86, the 350th anniversary of the University Utrecht, and the idea that there should be a national science center in the Netherlands.
Oh yeah, I remember. Okay, yeah.
The Exploratorium San Francisco.
Yes.
It was brought by a colleague, physicist, Kistemaker, who said we should have such a thing. And we went on an excursion to the United States, and I wasn't happy to be with that group. So we came into a totally different and new world for us.
Yeah.
And where shall it come? And there was a big fight. It could be Utrecht. This Kistemaker, he thought it should be Utrecht. Finally, it became a competition. The most beautiful building, and I mean, it was city managed, city promotion, and that kind of stuff. It had nothing to do with the original. That became what we call it sinking ship, the sinking boat.
It wasn't the new metropolis, and now it's called, I forgot the name. It's by Renzo Piano, the architect.
Huh? Yeah.
Renzo Piano, the architect.
Renzo Piano, yeah. Also, in that period, we have the fall of the Berlin Wall, which is very important because it opens up for the first time the East countries.
Yeah.
And this is an enormous, I think we should not underestimate the importance of the opening up of the East countries.
That's a very good point. Hungary, Czech Republic, all of them, Poland,
Eastern Germany. What the
Eastern Germany.
Leipzig, Dresden, all these kind of places.
Halle, Wittenberg.
All of them. And in '89, it was the big ICOM. That was when I first came in contact and became an ICOM member. '89, when it was in The Hague.
Yeah, you mean the General Conference of ICOM, the big one, was in The Hague.
The Hague, and I was part of the organization, and through SIMUSET.
Yeah.
And the SIMUSET had one day for university museums and collections already. So probably it's the first official university
CMUSET,
collection.
for those who don't know,
Yeah.
CMUSET is the international equivalent of UMAC,
Yeah.
but for museums of science and technology. So it's the International Committee of ICOM for
Yeah.
museums of science and technology. Of
Yeah.
course, many are universities.
Well,
and so where did they go in '89? Where did they go? Did they go to Utrecht, Amsterdam? Where did they go?
We had a fabulous excursion. One day, I'll tell you shortly. One day we started at Tyler's Museum in Ireland.
Absolutely, everyone must go and visit. If you have not been there, you have not seen anything. It's the most incredible museum
and then we
Europe.
took the boat over the river Spine with lunch on board and went to the Clercq. The Clercq is a...
I've not been there. I don't know what it is. I've not been there. I don't know what it is.
Been there. That is the pumping house for the Haarlemmermeer. The Haarlemmermeer is the enormous big polder, 5 meters below sea level, where you find Schiphol. I mean, and it is my birth ground, the Haarlemmermeer.
So you went there. So it's industrial heritage more. It's more industrial heritage.
That's absolutely, but it is one of the first steam pumps that opened up the whole thing.
Yeah, fantastic.
Because it was CMUSET, so they were interested.
Of course, they were interested in technology too. Of course,
that kind of stuff, absolutely. And my great grandfather in 1852 bought 60 hectare when the polder was just started, and I'm the 5th generation born on that place. So
imagine, crazy.
We then went to, 2 or 3 other pumping houses, one of which I managed to, on steam, I managed to have the steam engine work. Fantastic.
Wow.
Yeah. So we did that kind of stuff and saw sluices and, well, it was really industrial. It was absolutely industrial heritage. But
it raised awareness to the heritage, the fantastic heritage of science and technology in the Netherlands, which people probably...
And the continuous struggle with water. I mean, the river on my backside, it is 2 or 3 meters above
the sea level. Yeah.
So the river usually is the lowest point. Here it's the highest point.
It's incredible.
It's a crazy country. In the meantime, I was busy trying to find a new place for the museum, because when I came there, it was in the former veterinary pathology department building at the outskirts of the town. It was, from the point of view of architecture, it was a nice building, but totally useless and out of every walk, so not a good place. And from the very beginning, I had set my mind on a better place, and notably the Old Botanical Gardens, which were established, I think, in the medieval town. They were established in 1719 or something like that, in the orchard of one of the medieval cloisters. So it was really in the middle of the...
so the first Ortus of Utrecht, which is is like the second in the Netherlands, right? After Leiden?
It is the second place, but it is the Hortus was established in 1639. The university 36. The university, so it's 1639.
Around,
very old.
Yeah.
And so I wanted the university to go to that place where you had the old garden,
Hortus.
Old Hortus, and adjacent the botanical laboratory.
Yeah.
And which also became vacant, so we wanted to go there. That was a long struggle, and it cost a lot of money. Finally, the university still said we cannot afford it, but finally they allowed me if I can
raise the money,
finance the whole thing,
yeah, yeah,
you go ahead.
which you did successfully. Which you did successfully. You raised
Yes,
the
I did
money.
successfully.
Yeah.
The total cost was about 12 million, and I raised 3/4 of it from outside the university.
Fantastic.
Yeah. Okay. Yes.
And so, and there was the project, and there was moving collections to the place.
That was the whole stuff at the
gaining,
1996.
1996, gaining jurisdiction over all the collections that were dispersed in the University of Utrecht, because that was very important. It was a model that actually nowadays is the model that is used by many universities across the world, is not to concentrate, but to also
really, I'm in charge of all collections. I said I'm in charge of all collections. So that's
exactly.
And well, it finally worked. When the museum was opened in '96, I'm a builder and not someone to not that I don't take care at you go.
No. Yeah.
I need to construct and not to see after the whole thing.
Yeah.
And so we agreed to step down as director in 97, I guess, year after the museum opened. But I agreed to stay on. We agreed, the university and we agreed to stay on until my formal pension in 2006.
Yeah. So you stayed, and that's when you really became involved at international level, because we're 1996, the time we're 4 years before UMAC, 4 years before Universeum, all the international.
That is when I really began, because my job was to oversee, let's say the Dutch approach, deaccessioning. We had to deaccession the 3 or 4 million stones from the University of Amsterdam geology department. How do you do it?
Yeah.
But when you bring those 3 or 4 million samples back to the sub-collections, so the collections by the people that made them, or the purpose for which they were made, you bring back 4 million to 420 or something like that. And then you can make a decision. Well, this student who made this collection never finished it. It's in a place you can go there anyway, get rid of it.
You have no documentation, you have no associated data, it's gone.
Get rid of it.
Exactly, because that's one thing that people probably don't understand, because it's not the same in art. It's scientific collections, they are not just because they are beautiful objects, it's because of the information that they contain. Exactly. And if a fossil, or, for that matter, whatever, doesn't have associated information, when it was collected, in what stratigraphic level, I mean, if you disperse the whole purpose, which was to advance knowledge, becomes completely lost. And it's very deep. Sometimes it can be recovered, but it's very, very difficult. So that's one thing that sometimes it's difficult. University collections are full of these collections. Sometimes they're not scientific in the sense of being science. They can be archaeology. They can be scientific instruments. They can be, I don't know, non-scientific in the, in the traditional sense of the term, but they are scientific because of the information they have.
So that is what makes them special.
Yeah.
And without their documentation, they are useless. Well, you can use them sometimes as a nice
for exhibition, for display,
or whatever.
For display.
But for research, they lost it. So we went through some of those, and then of course the East countries opened up.
Yeah.
And they were interested in contact. So I went to some of them and helped them think about their collection ideology.
Yeah, because you had the experience of the Netherlands, which was really early in terms of reorganization of collections at national level. And so you went where exactly? Where did you go? You went to Germany?
Went to Germany, went to the Estonia.
Estonia.
Quite a bit.
Hungary too. You had relations with Hungary, no? No. With the musical instruments in Hungary. No, it was Leipzig.
Yeah,
sorry.
I have been. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. I remember. I don't remember her name, but she later became the keeper of the musical instruments collection
In
in
Leipzig.
Leipzig.
Yeah.
And we had a big fight over. She didn't want, but that is
Esther Fontana.
Esther Fontana, really, Esther Fontana. I had to have dinner with her in autumn 99, when winter 99 2000, when at the board meeting of ICOM in Paris, I had to represent the to-be UMAC. And Esther Fontana, she was very much opposed to it because she was afraid that these small discipline linked, like Simu said, and archaeology and fine arts
would become void. Gap.
Exactly.
There would be a gap.
So I had to take her out to dinner in the Place Henri IV. In the you know the Place Henri IV?
No. Yeah, Place Henri IV. Of course. Huh? Oh yeah, beautiful. So you took her out to convince her that UMAC was necessary.
Took her out for dinner. Yeah.
So what did you tell her?
Well, I finally convinced her that it is important. You can be member of several
international committees. You can be a member of the scientific instruments and at the same time be exactly.
So, and I mean, I had met her before. It was a wonderful meeting indeed in Budapest, where she was the keeper of this musical instruments.
Yeah, fantastic collection.
I was looking for the keeper of the scientific instruments, but brought to her, and she was doing something fantastic. In her room, she was sitting with strips of paper, and with little marks. What are you doing? Yes, it is sometimes difficult to establish the whereabouts where they are from, these instruments, but these instrument makers, they always use their local standards of measurements.
Oh, I see.
And through this paper, I could see this is a Bohemian thing. So that's funny, because just a few months ago, the already mentioned Gerard Turner told about the astrolabes made by Gemma Frisius.
Gemma Frisius, the Flemish.
The Flemish, who has his astrolabes both in Flanders and in Florence. And by the thickness of the plate, you can see from where they are.
You can identify the maker. You can identify the maker.
But also from whether they are
from where they're from. Yeah.
I mean, so this is.
It's amazing.
So we had a click.
Yeah. So you convinced Esther. Was there more people against UMAC at the time, or UMAC did not exist yet?
No. So
officially.
Let's go there, probably, but only. I mean, your question: were there people? Yes, it was especially the fact that you are so open about deaccessioning.
Yeah, exactly. That's not good. That's a taboo. That's a kind of a taboo. Yeah.
And that it is standard in university collections to do deaccessioning.
Because because of this disconnect, because people are always thinking of museums of art. Museums are art and, you know, archaeology. And of course, nobody throws away Vermeer. I mean, nobody's talking about that.
It were the
We're
museums of
talking about,
art
exactly.
which were so much opposed to it that it was exactly from that point. Going back, I mean, Culture 2000.
Yeah.
Was,
but first, let me, there
yeah.
was a fantastic person who was instrumental in the creation, because, okay, the relevance, the relevance of the Netherlands, at least from what I studied and learned and so on, comes from 2 points. One is that, well, three. One is you, because you quickly become involved. Then there is this context that you bring, the luggage that you bring with, which is the selection, surveying, selection, and you know, reorganization of collections in the Netherlands. So that's the second thing. And the third is a key instrumental person in ICOM, who is now dead, and Manus Brinkman, right? He was at that time, I don't know how it's called, I think Secretary-General of ICOM. He was not the president, he was Secretary-General
of ICOM, but before that, he was the Secretary-General of the Dutch Museums Association.
So he was aware of all these problems, right?
We knew each other, and I had big fights with him. Well, I mean, in the professional discussion.
Sure.
Oh yeah, Philips tried to convince museums to work on a computer. So there was money for computers, but we had to buy a Philips machine. And I was already working on Apple. I said, no way.
No way.
Yeah,
is that legal to force museums to, well, Philips was Dutch. So.
The introduction of the computer in the museums. And Philips wanted to do that. And I said, no way. So I had a big fight with Manus to get the money, which I didn't get after all. But so we knew each other quite well, and from the professional side. But that is of course, Manus comes in with Peter in the General Conference in Australia.
In Melbourne. In Melbourne, yeah.
That's when Manus comes in.
And in fact, there is a very interesting episode of this series of UMAC Origins with Bernice Murphy. And she, you know, because UMAC is like a sea, and there's all sorts of rivers flowing into that sea. One is the Dutch river that flows in this way that we're here, you know, exploring, but there's also the Australian river.
Absolutely.
And that's so very important. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and the colonial question, the Aboriginals, or what do you call it, the local,
the work that museums had been doing in terms of the activism that Australian university museums had been doing.
That is absolutely so, but it's so totally different from the Western European, where we have these old established museums with collections which go back to Aldrovandi. What is it, 15 something?
Yeah, of course, of course. And that's one of the challenges of a global organization, is that there is heterogeneity, there is a common ground, there are common problems, but then they are so different. And also the local traditions, you know, Chinese university museums, North American university museums,
African. They're all so different, indeed, But of course, then we have...
But Manus Brinkman, was he in favor of UMAC from the beginning, or did he have to be convinced? Don't remember.
Ask that Peter.
Yeah, I will ask Peter.
I think Peter convinced him.
Yeah.
And then Manus said, well, I know Stephen, because he knew I was busy trying to establish something like UMAC. But on the European level, I knew I tried to do with the people from the scientific.
So you did not know Peter directly. Peter talked to Manus, and Manus knew you, and then you became.
Manus linked Peter to each other, And then we started, I tried to find in my old mailbox, but it didn't work. So our first emails, but it was also about him and how he loved his little house up in the Blue Mountains. And we
that was
about,
later.
So we had,
that was later.
We found,
but Peter had a history already also of surveying and with the Cinderella collections.
Background.
Very common.
In terms of experience, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So this when Manus linked us together, I think that was
1998 was Melbourne. 1998.
That was instrumental. Then we had this contact, and leading up to the OECD meeting in September.
There was another meeting about the death of university museums. You heard about it in Glasgow.
Yes, I heard about it. I knew about it, but I thought I'm fed up with all these meetings, so I didn't go or didn't like the title.
But that was one important one too. Yeah.
And that was Glasgow. But earlier that year, we had a meeting of in the context of Culture 2000 in Halle.
Yes.
Where Thomas Bremer and Patrice Wegener. So that was the opening up of the East countries, the awareness of the enormous
heritage,
quality
museums,
of their collections, and the eagerness of our experience that brought together what became Universeum.
Because I will also put the link below, but there were two international associations that were created almost simultaneously in the middle of all these dynamics and the atmosphere of people, and people were common, some of the people, and Stephen was one of the people who were common to both. There is a UMAC, which was created in 2001, the first annual general meeting. In July 2001, Barcelona, but at the same time, Universeum, the European network for university heritage, academic heritage, was also being created. And the first meeting in the context of this Culture 2000 European program was in Halle, Wittenberg, a beautiful, beautiful town. And incredible museums and
the vice rector of Halle, Thomas Bremer, took the initiative. He was really he took the initiative. And in the years before, he had visited Liba Taub in Cambridge, and he had visited Utrecht, and he had done.
Because in few months, if you look at it, of course, there was all this context, but in few months, like 12, 14 months, all these people come together, Peter Stanbury, also Dominique Ferriot in France, Liba Taub in the UK, Thomas Bremer, and other people, we come together and we create these two organizations that not only have survived. It was difficult to create them, certainly at the beginning. It was not consensual. The ways of seeing things and of knowing was different in universities and the museum sector in general. So of course there was a little bit of tension, but not only they were created, but they have been, developing work. In 20 years, we're commemorating the 20 years. So it's fantastic. It's really fantastic. And so memory?
No, go ahead.
No, I was going to ask you, I have a beautiful photo to share of more than a photo. I have three things to share with you. I have, first of all, the official Barcelona photo, which you see here. And this is the founding fathers of UMAC that were there. Some people are missing here. They're probably taking the photo, for example, the first chair. Peter Stanbury is not here, but I see some of the people we already interviewed. Actually, there's Peter Tyrrell here. You are here. And we know everyone. Ingmarie Munktel also from Sweden. Also very early. Cornelia Weber here, exactly. And lots of people from Italy, from Greece, from the US. You see here Lyndall King. And
yeah.
And there's of course, remember Rafaela Simili from Bologna. So, and your colleague from Amsterdam, I forgot his name.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Katie from Finland, and Sally McDonald. So there's lots of people here. And many of them became involved in the first board of UMAC. So the first board I have here, it's not the total board, but at least I can show you. There's you.
Yeah.
There is Peter Stanbury, who was the chair, became the first chair. There's Penny Theolori Guti from Greece, and she became the first treasurer, I think.
Yeah.
And here is a person that was instrumental for that first meeting in Barcelona. Okay, do you want to tell us more about him? He's Francesc Uribe.
Francesc Uribe is the director of the National History Museum in Barcelona, and your Mac battery will sleep. Huh?
Yes, it's my. I have to.
Oh, you have
okay,
to
done. No problem.
Yeah, because I have to tell something about this whole thing. There was no, since UMAC didn't exist, there was no.
Exactly, it was the first meeting. Usually
it didn't exist, so
usually in the meetings, let me just say, usually in the meetings, it's the local organizer who, a university museum in the city or whatever, that really, gets things going, and the program and the visits and so on. But this was the ground zero of the meeting, so there was nobody, right?
There was nobody. And two stories about that. First, I knew Francesc. I had been in Barcelona before. I went just by being interested to see the Natural History Museum. Thought that's a nice place. Who is the director? Can I see him? And we came in contact, and that was okay. So I asked Clercq whether he would be. I was appointed at the OECD meeting. Peter already as interim chair, and I was the interim secretary. So the role of local organizer actually was me on distance.
Yeah, you had responsibility to mobilize things,
I had that was my responsibility. So I contacted Clercq, and he was very nice and helped us finding places, and we had drinks on the rooftop of his very nice museum. And so he was really instrumental as the local guide for all of us. But also I received a mail from a then absolutely unknown young woman, a student in Portugal who mailed me.
Okay, here we go. Here we go.
That she was desperately interested in university museums and collections. She couldn't afford the conference fee, but could find herself a place, and if she could come, you get.
That was me.
So you get quite a number of those things, and I thought, okay, to see whether it is serious, I will put her on the agenda and have her a 20-minute paper to introduce her PhD program.
And so I did. It was my first talk ever in the world.
Yeah. So that was what we did, and you found Dominique Ferriot to be your
and
supervisor.
It's amazing, because I think that UMAC did not lose this capacity to attract students, because what you're telling me is something that has happened to me also as a chair. People, because it has the capacity of attracting students. Because of it being a university committee, you can mobilize students,
Yeah,
and for us, of course, it's very interesting to have studies about
of course. Yeah,
university museums and collections. I mean, it's vital because we cannot progress as a group if we don't know more about our history, the types of collections, the
yeah,
challenges, but also new projects and so on. So
yeah,
it still happens that capacity to attract students happens a lot still
yeah.
with UMAC.
So really, I mean, that is what well, then it was formally
Created,
created. That's
yeah,
2001. So that's 20 years ago.
20 years ago. In
And
July, it's going to be 20 years.
it's really amazing to see how much has been changed, the professionality,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
also the entire, the, at least it's speaking for the Netherlands,
yeah,
where we, let's say when we started, as I said, the university thought this was none of our business,
yeah,
and staff or faculties had no time to
yeah,
waste their time
yeah.
on doing me a pleasure to help
Mm-hmm,
making an
mm-hmm,
exhibit
mm-hmm,
or
mm-hmm.
an exhibition. It is now turned around,
It has, it
that
has.
where
It's
at
not
least
no longer.
in Utrecht,
Yeah,
where the university sees the museum as an instrument
yeah,
to give public, tell the public why the university exists and what
exactly.
science is about, and
Yes.
to
And to project a social image of,
yeah, and
you
well,
know,
I mean, we have to what do you call it? Um, why so much public money is important to be
of
spent on
course, of
university.
course, of course.
And so I think that is a fascinating
To see the
change.
evolution, the
Yeah,
change. Yeah,
but I mean, so that is one important role.
mm-hmm.
But you keep the material archive of scientific research.
Yeah,
That is
exactly.
another thing which we must not forget. And I see how little staff the Utrecht Museum has.
Yeah,
It's a
that's a
shame.
problem. That's a
That's
problem.
perhaps the university should be ashamed of that. I mean,
Yeah,
it's great, and they help. Fantastic. The building.
it's an incredible collection. It's
Yeah,
just
I mean, it is.
fabulous.
I
Yes.
can. Well, this building, you can see it here. Is that?
No, because your thing, but I will put, I
Yeah.
don't
Okay.
know.
It
No,
is a
it's an
beautiful building, but
incredible.
it's a useless building. It is, I mean, beautiful but useless.
Yeah,
Architects that have a play. I mean, you only the functional use of the square meters is about 50%. And of course,
mm-hmm.
as you see with all the glass, it is from ecological point of view a disaster. And there was a very good plan. It was built for 25,000 visitors. The university thought we would never get any more, and it's now up to 70, 80,000.
Yeah, it is almost 100,000. Well, now COVID changed, but it
Well,
was
no,
a
the whole thing,
fine museum.
well, for the Utrecht Museum, that fits in fine because it is closed because of the reconstruction. It's closed
Exactly.
anyhow.
Yeah, yeah, exactly,
So I
exactly.
mean, that's
Yeah.
for them.
No, but I mean,
It's
when
fine.
we say, we say, and not only in the Netherlands, when we say that, of course, we come a long way,
Yeah,
considering the 1980s and the 1990s, certainly,
yeah,
especially in Europe, we've come really a long way because there was a lot, and a lot was abandoned in the late 1990s. So we came a long way. I mean, there is no rector or university president that today, you know, will say publicly that the thing should be closed, that it has no value and so on. I mean, it's not possible. There is we passed
yeah,
some line, we crossed the line, and in a good way. But of course, the problems persist, and they persist at the level of staff, because they're still understaffed, many university
Absolutely.
museums.
Yeah.
And at global
Staff is
level,
not seen as scientific personnel.
yeah. There's no, exactly.
Yeah.
There is a
So I
problem
was
because
also, yeah.
all the documentation that we talked about, the data associated with the collections, can only be retrieved in like 90% of the cases by people who know of the, people who are specialists in the researchers that are specialists in the area. They cannot be, properly retrieve the information by, I don't know, art historians, not offending, of course, but it's a geology collection, it's a paleontology collection. So you have to have paleontologists, you have to, there's no way that you can do omelets without eggs, right?
Yeah.
So that, go on. No, I wanted to say that there's still a long way to go, I think, in global terms, because other countries are not like Europe. And in terms of, yet, for example, South America, there's still a lot of lack of recognition, not everywhere, but there's still, because there's so many. Every country has, has 10, 12 universities, even a small country. And we're always hearing news of closures and lack of recognition. So although Europe has come a long way, we still have to continue working in solidarity with our colleagues, because there's a lot to be done. Africa.
The international platform as UMAC can be a stimulus for and a source of inspiration for those. I mean, you cannot help them physically, but you can. I mean, when you introduce them to new ideas and possibilities and concepts, that already is very useful. And to have the
opportunity to share, to share and to learn from the experiences of others, of course.
Also, and for me, crucial when I started, because our national government, we had this crazy idea of mother museums, and the national museums, they should be mother museums, and they should, and they could take the goodies from our collections, and then the rest of it be thrown away.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the best way to avoid collegial contacts at national level was to do that. So we never discussed our ideas and problems with the national museum. Whereas they should have been of help, they were a burden.
In the UK, they were a help, because I remember that Robert Anderson was the director of the British Museum when this survey was being done, and he was instrumental in, projecting the importance of university collections in the UK. So he was very important.
Robert Robert was a fantastic. I don't know.
He was a fantastic advocate for university museums at that time. He
was the official opener of my museum in '96.
Fantastic. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, we've come a long way in our conversation, but I don't let you go without asking one final question. Of these museums you've been everywhere. You've been to Australia, you've been, I don't know, to, of course, Europe, everywhere, also the US, which, you cannot reply with your museum, okay? Which museum really you think was kind of offered a good example at the time that you visited? Maybe now it's a different thing, but what was the museum, university museum or university collection that really impressed you in your, mandates as chair?
There is only one museum, which is not a university museum, which fits in, that's Taylor's.
And the Taylor's, oh, absolutely. Okay, you cannot reply with the time.
Taylor's is because
it's unbeatable.
It is science and art, and it's all these. So it is the totality.
It's 18th century Illuminism. It's an incredible thing.
And of course it is the from the 18th century, the transmission of science and knowledge to the general public on.
It's everything. It's research.
Yeah.
It's the teaching. It's the contemplation, the musing
all,
about all the beauty, but also propagating, disseminating to general public. It's an incredible museum. Everyone after COVID, of course, when we can travel, I invite everyone to visit not only the fabulous Utrecht University Museum when it's open.
When it's open, 22, I guess they will open.
I don't know exactly. 2022.
Well, they hope
they hope.
Yeah. So I mean,
and also
goes on amid COVID, so that's not that's not a problem.
Yeah, that's not a problem in terms of COVID.
And of course, I have my museum of the landscape around here.
You do. Yeah. And in fact, the Netherlands is like, if I could, well, I'm a bit suspect because I really enjoy and love the Netherlands, but if you could only select one country to visit museums, I think it would be the Netherlands, not only because there's fantastic heritage, but the government has invested a lot in the past 10 years in the Rijksmuseums and in the local museums, and there's always fantastic industrial heritage, fantastic.
And all on a very easily accessible. Short distances.
So we end up doing a touristic spot of the Netherlands. I think it entirely deserves. But our idea was really to, share Stephen's impressions and memories.
It was interesting because I'm out of the field for over 15 years or so, and parallel with when I started this international thing, I started also my engagement here with the Vecht area.
With the Vecht. Vecht is a river in the Netherlands.
I mean, this the far somewhere between the trees, you can find my house somewhere.
It's fantastic. We will put the link in the video below. And we will also, perhaps we can have another conversation about the landscape museums and the idea of museums without walls. That's for another. That's for another.
Museum, that's another thing.
That's another conversation. Fantastic one. So, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Stephen.
We haven't spoken for a long time.
We haven't, and it's been really a delight to catch up all this.
We see each other physically last.
Oh I have to go. As soon as I can, I will go. Because it's really, there are some countries that, because you cannot travel, you miss, and I miss a lot. I miss the Netherlands very much. And
you're welcome.
I must go.
There is
Okay, thank you so much, Stephen. Don't go away. And for you who have been watching everywhere in the world, thank you for your presence, and stay tuned for more episodes of UMAC Origins. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye all. And thank you.